I'm grateful you joined tonight. Your brain has been working non-stop today, processing thousands of thoughts, decisions, and emotions. Yet here you are, exhausted but unable to rest. Tonight, you'll discover why tiredness doesn't always lead to sleep. And by the end, you'll understand why your exhausted mind keeps you awake. Welcome to Psychology for Sleep. Now settle in. You're lying here with a mind that feels completely drained, yet somehow still racing. Allow yourself this moment of peace. We'll journey through 100 psychology facts about mental exhaustion and sleep, from the moment your brain decides it's too tired to rest, to the chemicals that keep you alert when you want to drift away, to the quiet path back to natural sleep. This thoughtful journey through consciousness builds bridges between searching minds. Your gentle support, a like, subscribe, or a quiet share, creates a pathway for more tired souls to discover and brings us closer to protecting this sanctuary for every exhausted mind who finds their way here. One peaceful night, one sleepy soul at a time. Let yourself settle completely here. Feel your jaw unclench, your breath deepen naturally. You don't need to hold on to any of these thoughts. Just sense that soothing heaviness enveloping you, like your consciousness slowly dimming its brightness. Thoughts dissolving into the peaceful fog of approaching sleep. Safe and undisturbed, close your eyes and breathe deeply. You're floating where memories rest safely in gentle darkness. Let your mind merge with infinite peace. And now we begin. Mental exhaustion feels completely different from physical tiredness. Yet many people confuse the two. When your body is tired after exercise or a long day of physical work, you usually fall asleep easily because your muscles need rest and your brain receives clear signals to shut down. But mental exhaustion works differently. Your brain can feel utterly drained, foggy, slow, unable to focus, yet remain hyper-alert and unable to transition into sleep. This happens because cognitive fatigue and sleep readiness are controlled by separate systems in your brain. According to research from the National Institutes of Health, updated in 2025, mental exhaustion activates stress response pathways that can actually prevent the neurochemical cascade needed for sleep onset. You can feel deeply tired yet remain unable to rest, caught in a state where exhaustion and alertness exist together. When you experience mental exhaustion, specific regions of your brain become depleted while others remain overactive. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making, focus, and emotional regulation, shows reduced activity after prolonged cognitive work. Functional MRI studies from 2024 reveal that mental fatigue creates a mismatch. Executive function areas slow down, while emotional processing centers, particularly the amygdala, often become more reactive. This creates the exhausted but anxious state so many people recognize. Your thinking feels sluggish, yet your emotions feel amplified. Small worries become big concerns. Meanwhile, your brain's arousal systems remain engaged, releasing stress hormones that interfere with the natural transition to sleep. You're simultaneously too tired to think clearly and too activated to rest. This neurological contradiction explains why lying in bed feeling exhausted doesn't automatically lead to sleep, even when you're not actively thinking. Your brain remains remarkably busy. Neuroscientists have identified a network of brain regions called the default mode network, or DMN, which activates during rest and mind wandering. This system helps process memories, imagine future scenarios, and integrate information from your day. Recent research from 2025 shows that mental exhaustion disrupts the DMN's normal functioning. Instead of engaging in restorative background processing, an exhausted DMN tends to loop through negative thoughts, unresolved problems, and anxious predictions. This is why your mind races with worries when you're trying to fall asleep despite feeling completely drained. Your brain's resting state has become unrestful. The very system designed to help you process and recover instead keeps you trapped in cycles of rumination and concern. Modern life places unprecedented cognitive demands on your brain. Every decision you make, from what to eat for breakfast to how to respond to a difficult email, consumes mental resources. Psychologists call this cognitive load, and research in cognitive psychology suggests that adults make thousands of decisions daily. Each choice, no matter how small, requires your brain to evaluate options, predict outcomes, and execute a decision. By evening, this accumulation of choices leaves you feeling depleted, yet paradoxically more reactive and less able to relax. You feel too tired to make one more decision, yet too activated to simply rest. The exhaustion comes from the continuous demand for mental processing, creating a state where tiredness doesn't automatically lead to sleep. Throughout your waking hours, a chemical called adenosine gradually accumulates in your brain. Adenosine is a byproduct of cellular energy use. The longer you're awake, the more adenosine builds up. This molecule binds to receptors in your brain and creates the sensation of sleepiness, a process called sleep pressure. Under normal circumstances, high adenosine levels signal your brain that it's time to rest. But here's where mental exhaustion complicates things. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline can override adenosine's sleep-promoting effects. According to research from late 2025, chronic stress creates a state where your body recognizes it's tired. Adenosine levels are high, but your brain's arousal systems remain activated. You feel the exhaustion but can't access the sleep. It's like having your foot on the brake and accelerator simultaneously. Cortisol, often called the stress hormone, follows a natural daily rhythm. In healthy sleep patterns, cortisol levels should peak in the morning to help you wake up, then gradually decline throughout the day, reaching their lowest point around midnight. But mental exhaustion and chronic stress disrupt this pattern. Studies from the National Institute of Mental Health in 2025 show that people experiencing prolonged mental strain often have elevated cortisol in the evening, exactly when it should be lowest. This elevated evening cortisol keeps your brain in a state of alertness, making sleep initiation difficult. You might feel physically exhausted, but biochemically, your body is still in daytime mode. This misalignment between how you feel and what your hormones are doing creates the frustrating sensation of being too tired to sleep. Sleep researchers have a term for what you're experiencing: tired but wired. This state occurs when your body recognizes it needs rest, while your nervous system remains in a hyper-aroused condition. Recent studies from 2026 reveal that this isn't laziness or a character flaw. It's a physiological state with measurable characteristics. In tired but wired states, your heart rate may be slightly elevated, your muscle tension increased, and your core body temperature higher than optimal for sleep. Meanwhile, brainwave patterns show a persistence of beta waves. The fast, alert brain rhythms associated with active thinking, when you should be transitioning to the slower alpha and theta waves of relaxation and early sleep. You're experiencing a genuine neurological mismatch between your subjective feeling of exhaustion and your objective state of arousal. Your brain processes an overwhelming amount of information every single day. Recent research shows that modern life exposes us to an unprecedented stream of information. Emails, messages, news, social media, and conversations. Each piece requires processing, categorization, and decision-making about whether to remember, act upon, or discard it. By evening, your brain's filtering systems become overwhelmed. Instead of smoothly transitioning to sleep, an overloaded mind often continues processing, sorting, and worrying about unresolved information. You lie in bed feeling mentally exhausted, yet your brain keeps working, unable to shift into the off-duty mode necessary for sleep. The exhaustion comes from overstimulation rather than understimulation, from too much input rather than too little rest. Mental exhaustion isn't just cognitive, it's deeply emotional. Recent research distinguishes between cognitive fatigue from thinking tasks and emotional exhaustion from managing feelings and social interactions. Studies from 2025 show that emotional exhaustion particularly interferes with sleep. When you spend your day managing difficult emotions, navigating social dynamics, or suppressing feelings to maintain professionalism, your brain's emotional regulation systems become depleted. The amygdala, your brain's emotional center, becomes hyperreactive, while the prefrontal cortex's regulatory capacity weakens. By bedtime, you feel emotionally raw and mentally exhausted. Yet your overactive amygdala keeps scanning for threats and problems. Small concerns feel enormous. Your exhausted mind can't calm your activated emotions. Sleep feels impossible because emotional regulation is required for sleep onset, and that system is already depleted. Sleep scientists describe two opposing forces that determine whether you sleep: sleep pressure and arousal. Sleep pressure builds throughout the day as adenosine accumulates and your body's need for rest increases. Arousal encompasses all the systems keeping you alert: stress hormones, environmental stimuli, racing thoughts, and emotional activation. Healthy sleep occurs when sleep pressure is high and arousal is low. But mental exhaustion creates a problematic pattern. Sleep pressure builds normally or even excessively because you're working your brain so hard. But arousal remains elevated due to stress, worry, and hypervigilance. Research from late 2025 shows this creates a state of maximum discomfort. You feel intensely tired because sleep pressure is high, but you can't sleep because arousal is also high. It's like trying to fall asleep at a rock concert. The exhaustion is real, but so is the stimulation. Insomnia researchers have developed what they call the hyperarousal model to explain why exhausted people can't sleep. This model, refined through studies in 2025 and 2026, proposes that insomnia isn't primarily about lack of sleepiness. It's about excessive arousal, preventing sleep despite adequate sleep pressure. Three types of hyperarousal work together: cognitive, racing thoughts; emotional, anxiety and worry; and physiological, elevated heart rate and muscle tension. Mental exhaustion often triggers all three types simultaneously. Your depleted cognitive resources make it harder to control anxious thoughts. Your exhausted emotional regulation makes you more reactive. Your stress response remains activated even though you want to rest. Understanding this model helps explain why simply being tired isn't enough. You must also reduce arousal before sleep becomes possible. When you're lying in bed feeling exhausted but unable to sleep, you might try to force yourself to stop thinking. Unfortunately, this strategy usually backfires. A phenomenon called ironic process theory, extensively studied since the 1990s and confirmed by recent 2025 research, demonstrates that trying to suppress thoughts actually makes them more prominent. When you tell yourself don't think about work, your brain creates a monitoring process to check whether you're successfully not thinking about work, which requires thinking about work. This creates a frustrating loop where your efforts to quiet your mind actually increase mental activity. For an already exhausted brain with depleted self-control resources, thought suppression becomes nearly impossible. You're too tired to successfully control your thoughts. Yet you keep trying, which makes the thoughts stronger and sleep feel even more distant. Deep within your brain, an ancient vigilant system constantly monitors for threats. This system, centered in the amygdala and connected to stress response circuits, evolved to keep our ancestors safe from danger. Recent research from 2026 shows that mental exhaustion doesn't deactivate this vigilant system. It actually makes it more sensitive. When you're mentally drained, your brain's threat detection becomes less accurate but more active. Minor concerns register as major problems. Ambiguous situations feel threatening. This hypervigilant state floods your system with stress hormones that directly oppose sleep. You might consciously know you're safe in your bed, yet your vigilance system remains activated, scanning for problems that don't exist. Your exhausted prefrontal cortex can't effectively reassure your amygdala that everything is okay. The result? You feel simultaneously depleted and alert. Working memory, your brain's system for temporarily holding and manipulating information, has limited capacity. Cognitive psychologists compare it to a mental whiteboard where you write notes, solve problems, and juggle multiple pieces of information throughout your day. This whiteboard becomes increasingly crowded with unfinished tasks, unresolved concerns, and information awaiting processing. Research published in early 2026 demonstrates that an overloaded working memory directly interferes with sleep onset. When you lie down to rest, all those items on your mental whiteboard demand attention. Your exhausted brain tries to clear the whiteboard by thinking through each item, but you're too tired to actually resolve anything. You enter a loop of unproductive mental spinning, too exhausted to think effectively, too activated by unfinished business to sleep. One of the most challenging aspects of the exhaustion sleep difficulty is anticipatory anxiety about sleep itself. If you've experienced several nights of being too exhausted to sleep, your brain begins to associate bedtime with frustration and failure. Studies from 2025 on sleep-related anxiety show that this creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. As bedtime approaches, you start worrying about whether you'll be able to sleep. This worry activates your stress response, releasing cortisol and adrenaline, the exact chemicals that prevent sleep. Your exhausted mind knows you need rest, which makes you anxious about not getting rest, which makes rest impossible. the bed itself becomes a trigger for arousal rather than relaxation. You might feel sleepy on the couch, but the moment you get into bed, alertness floods back. The anticipation of sleep difficulty creates the very difficulty you fear. Your prefrontal cortex, the brain region just behind your forehead, serves as your control center for executive functions, planning, decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation. This area is particularly vulnerable to mental exhaustion. Neuroscience research from 2026, using advanced imaging techniques, reveals that after prolonged cognitive work, the prefrontal cortex shows reduced glucose metabolism and decreased connectivity with other brain regions. This depletion has direct consequences for sleep. A depleted prefrontal cortex struggles to regulate the amygdala's emotional reactions, control ruminating thoughts, or engage the relaxation response needed for sleep. You become more reactive, more worried, and less able to calm yourself, all while feeling utterly exhausted. The very brain region you need to help you relax is the most depleted by your exhausting day. Rumination, the tendency to repeatedly think about problems, regrets, or worries, intensifies dramatically when you're mentally exhausted. Recent psychological research from 2025 shows that rumination and mental exhaustion create a vicious cycle. When you're well rested, your prefrontal cortex can redirect attention away from negative thoughts. But when exhausted, this cognitive control weakens. Rumination takes over, spinning the same thoughts repeatedly without reaching resolution or insight. Studies show that bedtime rumination focuses on three main themes: replaying social interactions and wondering if you said the wrong thing, worrying about upcoming challenges, and catastrophizing about minor problems. Your exhausted mind can't solve these concerns. You're too cognitively depleted, but it can't stop trying either. The mental wheel keeps spinning, burning energy, preventing sleep, increasing exhaustion. One of the most counterintuitive aspects of sleep science is this: the harder you try to sleep, the less likely you are to succeed. Sleep is a passive process that requires letting go of control. Yet when you're exhausted and wanting rest, trying harder feels like the logical response. Research from 2026 on sleep effort demonstrates that monitoring yourself for signs of sleepiness, am I getting sleepy yet? Evaluating your sleep attempts, why can't I just fall asleep? And trying to force relaxation all activate the very alerting systems that prevent sleep. Your exhausted brain knows you need sleep, so it tries to make sleep happen. But sleep doesn't respond to effort. It responds to surrender. The trying itself becomes the obstacle. The exhaustion makes you try harder, which keeps you more awake. Your body operates on an internal 24-hour clock called the circadian rhythm, which regulates sleep-wake cycles, hormone release, body temperature, and countless other processes. This rhythm is controlled by a small cluster of cells in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. When you experience chronic mental exhaustion, your actual sleep-wake behavior often conflicts with your natural circadian rhythm. You might stay up late working despite feeling tired, or lie awake at night despite your circadian system signaling it's time to sleep. Research from late 2025 shows that mental stress can desynchronize your circadian clock from your actual schedule. Your body might be programmed for sleep, but your stress response overrides those signals. You feel exhausted because you're fighting your own biology. But you can't sleep because your stress system won't allow your circadian system to function normally. Many people experience a frustrating pattern. They feel exhausted in the evening, but if they miss their natural sleep window, they suddenly feel alert again. Sleep researchers call this a second wind. This happens because cortisol, which should be declining in the evening, sometimes rises unexpectedly when you push through tiredness. Studies from 2025 show this is particularly common in people experiencing chronic stress or mental exhaustion. Your body interprets staying awake past your natural bedtime as a potential emergency. Perhaps you're being kept awake by danger, and releases stress hormones to keep you alert. By the time you finally try to sleep, you've inadvertently activated your arousal system. You went from exhausted to wired by missing your optimal sleep timing. The window closed, and now you're stuck awake. While physical arousal involves elevated heart rate and muscle tension, cognitive arousal is a distinct type of activation focused entirely in your thoughts. It's characterized by mental racing, inability to quiet your mind, and the sensation that thoughts are coming too quickly to control. Recent research from early 2026 identifies cognitive arousal as one of the strongest predictors of sleep difficulty, even stronger than physical tension. When you're mentally exhausted, cognitive arousal often increases because your brain's filtering system, the mechanism that decides which thoughts deserve attention, becomes less effective. Every thought feels urgent. Worries that you'd normally dismiss when well-rested demand full attention when exhausted. Your depleted brain can't distinguish between important concerns and trivial worries. Everything feels equally pressing, creating a mental storm that's incompatible with sleep's quiet stillness. Your brain uses sleep to process and consolidate memories, particularly emotional memories. Recent neuroscience research from 2025 reveals a problematic pattern. When you're mentally exhausted but can't sleep, your brain enters a state where emotional memories become more present and persistent. Throughout your day, you accumulate emotional experiences, frustrations, disappointments, anxieties, conflicts. Normally, sleep helps process these experiences, stripping away excessive emotional intensity while preserving important information. But when mental exhaustion prevents sleep, these emotional memories remain unprocessed and often intensify. They replay in your mind with heightened emotional charge. Past regrets feel more painful. Future worries feel more threatening. Your exhausted state makes you more emotionally reactive to these memories. Yet you can't access the sleep that would help process them. The emotional backlog grows, making sleep even more difficult. Psychological research consistently shows that perceived control over one's environment is crucial for well-being and sleep quality. When you feel in control, stress responses decrease and relaxation becomes easier. But mental exhaustion often emerges from situations where you feel out of control. Overwhelming workloads, interpersonal conflicts, uncertain futures, responsibilities beyond your capacity. Studies published in 2026 demonstrate that this perceived lack of control directly interferes with sleep by maintaining vigilance and stress activation. Your brain interprets lack of control as potential danger, which requires alertness. Even when you're physically safe in bed, your mind continues scanning for ways to regain control, solve problems, and prepare for threats. You're exhausted from feeling powerless. Yet that same powerlessness keeps your brain activated and alert. The loss of control creates both the exhaustion and the inability to escape it through sleep. If you repeatedly experience nights of lying awake feeling exhausted, your brain can develop what sleep specialists call learned wakefulness or conditioned arousal. This concept, thoroughly studied in recent 2025 research, describes how the bed and bedroom become associated with frustration and wakefulness rather than sleep. Classical conditioning, the same process that made Pavlov's dog salivate at the sound of a bell, causes your brain to become alert when you enter your sleep environment. You might feel sleepy in other rooms, but your bedroom triggers wakefulness because that's where you've spent so many hours awake and frustrated. Your exhausted brain has learned to associate sleep cues with the opposite of sleep. Breaking this association requires retraining your brain's expectations, which feels nearly impossible when you're already depleted. The ultimate challenge of mental exhaustion is this: the thing you need most to recover, sleep, is exactly what mental exhaustion prevents you from getting. Your brain needs the restoration that occurs during deep sleep. During sleep, your brain clears metabolic waste products, consolidates memories, processes emotions, and repairs cellular damage from the day's mental work. But the neurochemical state created by prolonged mental strain actively opposes sleep initiation. Recent research from early 2026 shows that this creates a difficult cycle. Exhaustion prevents sleep. Lack of sleep increases exhaustion. Increased exhaustion makes sleep even harder. You're caught in a pattern where the problem and the inability to solve the problem are the same thing. Understanding this challenge is the first step toward finding a way through it. Let's pause here and notice your body. As you breathe out slowly, appreciate each tiny cell inside. Trillions of organisms working in silence. Heart beating, lungs breathing, brain thinking, all without your command. Notice the gentle sensations on your skin, in your muscles, along your spine. You are a complete ecosystem, diverse, self-balancing. Your body knows what to do. Your body is trying to help you rest. Even now, recovery processes are beginning. Even in wakefulness, your body is working toward peace. Now we continue. Your body's stress response, often called the fight or flight system, evolved to keep you safe from immediate physical dangers. When activated, it releases hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that increase heart rate, sharpen focus, and prepare your body for action. This system is incredibly effective for short-term threats. But modern mental exhaustion comes from chronic, ongoing stressors rather than brief emergencies. According to research from 2026, chronic activation of your stress response creates a state where your body forgets how to fully stand down. Even when lying in bed, your sympathetic nervous system remains partially activated. You feel exhausted because this constant activation is draining. But you can't sleep because the system won't fully disengage. Two hormones play opposing roles in your sleep-wake cycle. Cortisol keeps you alert, while melatonin promotes sleep. In healthy patterns, cortisol peaks in the morning and declines by evening, while melatonin begins rising as darkness falls. Mental exhaustion disrupts this balance. Studies from late 2025 show that chronic stress maintains elevated evening cortisol, which disrupts the circadian signals needed for melatonin production. Your pineal gland, the small structure in your brain that produces melatonin, requires the natural cortisol decline to function properly. When cortisol remains elevated despite your exhaustion, melatonin can't rise sufficiently to induce sleepiness. You have the physical sensation of tiredness from depleted mental resources, but you lack the biochemical signal for sleep. The hormones that should help you rest are blocked by the hormones of stress. Mental stress creates physical tension, often without your conscious awareness. Throughout a mentally exhausting day, your shoulders gradually rise toward your ears. Your jaw clenches, your breathing becomes shallow, and your muscles maintain low-level contractions. This persistent tension requires energy and sends alerting signals to your brain. Research from 2026 using electromyography shows that people with mental exhaustion often carry significantly elevated muscle tension into bedtime. Your tense muscles tell your brain that you're still on duty, still holding something, still not safe to fully relax. The exhaustion you feel is partly from this constant muscular bracing. Yet the tension persists because your stress response won't let go, creating a physical barrier to sleep. When you're mentally stressed or exhausted, your breathing often shifts from deep, diaphragmatic breathing to shallow, chest-based breathing. This change happens unconsciously, but has significant effects. Shallow breathing slightly reduces oxygen intake and increases carbon dioxide levels, which can trigger subtle feelings of anxiety and maintain alertness. Studies published in early 2026 demonstrate that breathing patterns directly influence autonomic nervous system activity. Shallow, rapid breathing activates your sympathetic, alert nervous system, while slow, deep breathing activates your parasympathetic, relaxation system. When you're lying in bed feeling exhausted but unable to sleep, your breathing is often stuck in the shallow, alert pattern. Your breath, something that could help you relax, is instead reinforcing your wakefulness. Scientists use the term allostatic load to describe the cumulative wear and tear on your body from chronic stress. Every time your stress response activates, your body mobilizes resources, increasing heart rate, releasing hormones, shunting blood to muscles. When stress is brief, your body recovers. But chronic mental exhaustion means your stress systems are constantly or frequently activated without adequate recovery time. Research from 2025 shows that high allostatic load is strongly associated with sleep difficulties. Your body is essentially in debt. It owes rest and recovery that it hasn't received. This debt manifests as the exhausted but wired state. You feel the weight of accumulated stress, exhaustion, but your body remains in activation mode, unable to sleep, waiting for safety that hasn't arrived. When you're mentally exhausted, negative thinking patterns intensify and become harder to interrupt. Cognitive psychology research from 2026 identifies several types of negative spirals common at bedtime: catastrophizing, imagining worst-case scenarios, overgeneralization. One problem means everything is terrible, and personalization, assuming you're responsible for things beyond your control. Your exhausted prefrontal cortex lacks the resources to challenge these thoughts effectively. Each negative thought triggers emotional reactions, which release stress hormones, which maintain alertness, which prevents sleep, which gives you more time to think negatively. The spiral feeds itself. You're too tired to think constructively, but too activated by negative thoughts to stop thinking. The exhaustion makes you vulnerable. The vulnerability prevents escape through sleep. Your body temperature naturally declines in the evening as part of the process of falling asleep. This temperature drop signals your brain that it's time to rest. But when your stress response remains active, your metabolic rate stays slightly elevated, maintaining warmth that prevents the cooling needed for sleep. Additionally, mental stress often causes subtle increases in muscle tension throughout your body, generating heat. You might not consciously notice feeling hot, but your core temperature remains a fraction of a degree too high for easy sleep onset. This is another way that stress-induced exhaustion prevents the rest you need. Your body's temperature rhythm can't complete its natural evening descent. Many people find that worries feel most intense and overwhelming in the window between lying down and falling asleep. Sleep researchers have identified why this happens. During the day, external stimulation and activities distract you from fully experiencing your worries. But when you lie down in a dark, quiet room with nothing to do, your attention turns inward. Without external distraction, worries demand full attention. Recent research from 2026 shows that this worry window is particularly intense for exhausted minds because cognitive fatigue reduces your ability to rationally evaluate threats. Worries that seem manageable during the day become catastrophic at night. Your depleted brain can't distinguish between real and imagined threats, so it treats all worries as urgent, releasing stress hormones that ensure you stay awake. As mentioned earlier, sleep pressure, the accumulation of adenosine, and the increasing biological need for sleep builds throughout your waking hours. But sleep pressure alone doesn't guarantee sleep. You also need your arousal systems to stand down. Mental exhaustion creates a challenging situation. Very high sleep pressure. You feel intensely tired. Combined with high arousal, your stress response remains active. Research from early 2026 describes this as one of the most uncomfortable states humans experience. You have the strong physical sensation of needing sleep deeply, but your brain refuses to initiate the sleep process. It's like being extremely hungry but unable to swallow food. The need is intense. The inability is complete. And the combination creates profound distress that further activates stress responses. For some people, especially those in demanding careers or with strong achievement identities, the inability to sleep despite exhaustion carries psychological meaning beyond just feeling tired. Recent psychological research from 2025 explores how sleep difficulties threaten identity. If you see yourself as competent and capable, being unable to accomplish the supposedly simple task of sleeping feels like a fundamental failure. This threat to identity triggers additional stress. You might think, why can't I do this basic thing everyone else can sleep? What's wrong with me? These thoughts activate shame and anxiety, which flood your system with stress hormones. The exhaustion is bad enough, but the perceived failure of being exhausted yet unable to sleep adds another layer of distress that further prevents rest. There's a critical point where normal tiredness crosses into problematic exhaustion. Early tiredness actually helps sleep. You feel pleasantly drowsy and drift off easily. But beyond a certain threshold, tiredness becomes counterproductive. You become overtired, irritable, and hyper-alert rather than relaxed and sleepy. Parents recognize this in children. If you put an overtired child to bed, they often become wild and resistant, rather than peaceful and drowsy. Adults experience the same phenomenon. Studies from 2026 suggest this tipping point relates to stress hormone release. Moderate tiredness doesn't threaten your functioning, but extreme exhaustion triggers survival systems that release stress hormones to keep you functional. Being too exhausted activates wakefulness as a protective mechanism, even though rest is what you need. Not all mental exhaustion is the same. Recent research distinguishes between cognitive exhaustion from thinking tasks, emotional exhaustion from managing feelings, and social exhaustion from interpersonal interactions. Social exhaustion, common among people who work with others constantly or are naturally introverted, has particularly powerful effects on sleep. Studies from 2025 show that social interactions, even positive ones, activate brain regions involved in prediction, evaluation, and emotional regulation. After hours of social engagement, these systems become depleted but remain partially activated, running background processes, analyzing social interactions. At night, your brain replays conversations, evaluates how others perceived you, and worries about social standing. This social processing interferes with sleep while feeling utterly exhausting. You're drained from being with people, but can't rest because your brain keeps processing social information. When you're lying awake feeling exhausted, you might think about others who seem to sleep easily. This comparison often makes things worse. Social comparison research from 2026 shows that comparing your sleep difficulties to others' apparent ease triggers feelings of inadequacy, frustration, and isolation. You might think, my partner falls asleep instantly. Why can't I or everyone else seems fine on less sleep? What's wrong with me? These comparisons activate stress responses and increase arousal. The truth is, sleep difficulties are remarkably common. Studies suggest 1 in 3 adults experiences insomnia symptoms regularly. But sleep problems are often invisible. Others' sleep might be worse than it appears, but comparison still makes you feel uniquely broken, which releases stress hormones that further prevent sleep. Modern culture often treats exhaustion as a badge of honor and rest as laziness. This creates psychological conflict when you're too exhausted to sleep. Part of you knows you need rest deeply, but another part might judge yourself for needing rest, or feel guilty about not being productive. Research from 2025 on rest guilt demonstrates that many people struggle to allow themselves genuine rest even when exhausted. You might lie in bed mentally reviewing your to-do list, planning tomorrow, or feeling guilty about resting while things remain undone. This internal conflict maintains activation. You can't fully surrender to sleep because part of your mind insists you should be doing something productive. The cultural message that productivity equals worth makes rest feel like moral failure, which triggers stress that prevents the rest you need. Understanding why exhaustion prevents sleep isn't just intellectually interesting. It's the foundation for finding relief. When you believe you're failing at something simple, you add shame and frustration to your existing exhaustion. But recognizing that this is a well-documented neurobiological state helps remove self-blame. Research from early 2026 shows that self-compassion significantly improves sleep outcomes. When you understand that your exhausted but awake state results from stress hormones, nervous system activation, and depleted cognitive resources rather than personal failure, you can approach the situation differently. The exhaustion-sleep mismatch isn't a flaw in your character. It's a challenging but addressable neurobiological state. This understanding is the first step toward resolving the difficulty. You're not broken. You're experiencing something that can be addressed. You're still here with me. Thoughts still flickering like candlelight. Just notice. Don't judge. Just notice where your mind is. We're exploring consciousness itself. The very thing doing the exploring right now. Strange, beautiful, and perfectly calm. There are others listening too, in their own quiet darkness, experiencing their own version of this moment. A gentle like, subscribe, or sharing your experience could help someone else find this same understanding tonight. Let's drift onward together. Your sleep-wake state is governed by two main systems working in opposition. Process S, or sleep pressure, builds throughout the day as adenosine accumulates. Process C, your circadian rhythm, follows a 24-hour cycle of alertness and drowsiness. Normally, these systems work together. As evening approaches, your circadian system signals drowsiness, while sleep pressure peaks, making sleep natural and easy. But mental exhaustion disrupts this coordination. Your stress response overrides both systems. Sleep pressure is high, telling you you're exhausted. Your circadian system signals it's night, time to rest. But your stress hormones veto both signals, maintaining alertness despite biological commands to sleep. You're not defying these systems by choice. Stress is overpowering them. When stress becomes chronic, your brain can shift into a state called hypervigilance, excessive attention to potential threats in your environment. This state evolved to keep us safe in genuinely dangerous situations, but it can become stuck in the on position. Recent studies from 2026 show that hypervigilance is common in people experiencing the tired but wired state. Your exhausted mind remains alert to every sound, every sensation, every passing thought, treating each as potentially significant. A distant car becomes something to monitor. A random thought becomes a problem requiring analysis. This constant scanning burns energy, increases arousal, and prevents the mental quieting necessary for sleep. Your brain interprets exhaustion itself as a potential danger requiring vigilance. Sleep and wakefulness depend on a delicate balance of neurotransmitters, chemical messengers that neurons use to communicate. Wakefulness relies primarily on neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin. Sleep depends on the neurotransmitter GABA and the hormone melatonin. Mental exhaustion and stress alter this balance. Studies from 2025 show that chronic stress can deplete serotonin, which helps regulate mood and sleep, while keeping norepinephrine, an alerting neurotransmitter, elevated. Your brain's chemical environment becomes skewed toward wakefulness even when you want sleep. This isn't something you can simply decide to change. These are molecular-level processes influenced by stress, exhaustion, and your body's attempt to keep you functioning despite inadequate rest. Therapists and neuroscientists describe something called your window of tolerance, the zone of arousal where you can function effectively, process information, and manage emotions. When you're within this window, stress feels manageable and sleep comes naturally. But chronic exhaustion and stress push you outside this window into hyperarousal, too much activation, or hypoarousal, shutdown, and numbness. When you're lying awake feeling exhausted, you're likely in hyperarousal. Your nervous system is revved too high. Research from 2026 shows that once you exit your window of tolerance, getting back inside requires specific interventions. Simply wanting to calm down doesn't work. Your nervous system needs help down-regulating. Understanding this explains why willpower alone can't make you sleep, even if you do fall asleep when exhausted. Your sleep quality often suffers. Sleep proceeds through distinct stages: light sleep, deep sleep, and REM, dreaming. Sleep, each serving different functions. Healthy sleep cycles through these stages multiple times per night. But stress hormones disrupt sleep architecture. Studies from late 2025 show that elevated cortisol reduces time spent in deep sleep and increases nighttime awakenings. You might sleep for 7 hours, but wake up feeling unrefreshed because you spent most of the night in light sleep. With frequent arousals you may not even remember. Your brain's continued alertness prevents the deep restoration that makes sleep refreshing. Quantity doesn't guarantee quality when stress disrupts the structure. Exhaustion changes how you think, creating cognitive distortions, systematic errors in thinking that feel completely true in the moment. Common distortions include catastrophizing. This will never improve. All or nothing thinking. If I'm not perfect, I've failed. And negative predictions. Tomorrow will be terrible. These distortions feel like accurate assessments of reality when you're exhausted. Research from 2026 shows that sleep deprivation and mental exhaustion reduce activity in prefrontal regions responsible for rational evaluation. Your thinking becomes more emotional, more extreme, more negative. These distorted thoughts trigger stress responses that prevent sleep. You're caught in a loop. Exhaustion creates negative thinking, which creates stress, which prevents sleep, which increases exhaustion. A concept from trauma psychology applies here. The body keeps score. Your body remembers stress. Even stress your conscious mind has forgotten or dismissed. Throughout your day, small stresses accumulate in your body. A tense conversation, a deadline, a disappointment, a worry. Each leaves a trace of activation in your nervous system. By evening, your body carries the cumulative weight of the day's stress, even if you're not consciously thinking about these events. Studies from 2025 show that this somatic, body-based, stress memory can maintain alertness independent of your thoughts. Even if your mind wants rest, your body remains guarded. The physical score of accumulated stress keeps you awake despite mental exhaustion. The pattern of the tired but wired state continues. Lack of sleep makes the situation more persistent. Sleep deprivation increases emotional reactivity, reduces stress tolerance, and impairs the prefrontal cortex's regulatory abilities. After several nights of poor sleep, your threshold for stress becomes much lower. Things that normally wouldn't bother you become overwhelming. Research from early 2026 shows that partial sleep deprivation over several nights has cumulative effects similar to complete sleep deprivation. Each night of inadequate sleep makes you more vulnerable to stress, more likely to experience the tired but wired state, and less able to implement strategies that might help. The deficit compounds, creating a deepening pattern that feels increasingly difficult to shift. Falling asleep requires a profound act of trust. Trust that you'll be safe, that nothing bad will happen if you lose consciousness, that you can let go of control. Mental exhaustion often erodes this trust. If you've experienced repeated nights of lying awake, your brain learns not to trust that sleep will come. If stress dominates your life, your nervous system doesn't trust that you're safe. This lack of trust maintains alertness. Studies from 2025 show that cultivating a sense of safety is essential for sleep. But exhaustion makes safety feel inaccessible. You might logically know you're safe, but your body doesn't believe it. Trust takes time to rebuild, especially when exhaustion has taught your system to remain vigilant. We're halfway through our exploration now, midway between wakefulness and the promise of sleep. You've learned why exhaustion doesn't automatically lead to rest. The stress hormones, the vigilant systems, the cognitive arousal, the nervous system activation that keeps you awake despite overwhelming tiredness. This isn't a failure on your part. It's a mismatch between your body's protective systems and your actual needs. The exhaustion you feel is real. The difficulty sleeping is also real. Both are true simultaneously, creating the challenge that brought you here tonight. Understanding the mechanisms doesn't instantly solve the situation, but it removes the shame and offers the first glimmer of a path forward. You're not broken. You're experiencing something that can be addressed. Take a moment to notice where you are. In this room, in this space, in this moment. Feel the surface beneath you supporting your weight. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. Hear whatever sounds surround you, distant or close. They're just sounds, not threats. While the vast universe continues to spin, expand, change. This second you're breathing, listening, is unique. This moment belongs to you. Nothing is required right now, except breathing. Your exhaustion is not your enemy. It's your body asking for what it needs. And slowly, gently, we're moving toward rest. And we continue drifting to understand what your exhausted brain needs. It helps to know what sleep actually does. Sleep isn't passive shutdown. It's active restoration. During sleep, your brain clears metabolic waste products through a system called the glymphatic system, which becomes 10 times more active during sleep than wakefulness. This system washes away toxins that accumulate during mental activity, including proteins associated with cognitive decline. Sleep also consolidates memories, processing information and emotions from your day. Deep sleep strengthens your immune system. REM sleep enhances creativity and emotional regulation. Your exhausted brain needs all these restorative processes. The longer they're delayed by sleeplessness, the more intense the need becomes. Yet the more stress prevents access. Your autonomic nervous system has two branches: sympathetic, alert, active, stressed, and parasympathetic, calm, resting, digesting. These work like a seesaw. When one is up, the other is down. Mental exhaustion often means your sympathetic system has been dominant for too long. Your body needs to shift toward parasympathetic dominance for sleep to occur. This shift happens naturally when you feel safe and calm, but it can also be gently encouraged through specific activities. Slow breathing, gentle movement, warm temperatures, soft lighting, soothing sounds. Your exhausted nervous system needs help making this shift. It's stuck in sympathetic mode not because you're broken, but because stress keeps tipping the seesaw the wrong way. Your brain constantly assesses whether you're safe. This assessment happens largely below conscious awareness. In ancient brain structures that prioritize survival, when these structures detect threat, even subtle, modern threats like unfinished work or relationship tension, they maintain alertness. Sleep is only permitted when safety is established. This explains why you can't just decide to fall asleep despite exhaustion. Decision-making happens in your conscious, thinking brain. But the permission to sleep comes from deeper structures that respond to safety signals. Soft light, comfortable temperature, familiar sounds, secure environment. Your exhausted mind needs reassurance at a level deeper than thought. These deeper structures need evidence that letting go of consciousness is safe. The path from exhausted but awake to peaceful sleep isn't instant. It requires progressive changes in multiple body systems. Your heart rate needs to slow gradually. Your breathing needs to deepen. Your muscle tension needs to release progressively. Your core body temperature needs to drop slightly. Your brain waves need to transition from beta, alert, through alpha, relaxed, to theta, drowsy. Research shows these changes happen in sequence, each one enabling the next. When stress keeps you activated, this sequence can't begin. Your exhausted body wants to jump straight to sleep, but biology requires the gradual progression. Understanding this helps explain why sleep doesn't happen instantly just because you're tired. Recovery from exhaustion and return to healthy sleep patterns doesn't happen all at once. It follows a rhythm of small improvements punctuated by setbacks. You might have one better night, followed by 2 difficult nights. This isn't failure. It's the normal pattern of nervous system regulation. Research shows that healing from chronic stress and exhaustion is inherently non-linear. Your body is recalibrating complex systems that have been dysregulated for a long time. Each slightly better night teaches your nervous system that safety and rest are possible. Progress happens through repetition and patience, not through force or perfection. Your exhausted system needs time and gentleness to remember how to rest. One of the most counterintuitive findings in sleep research is that accepting sleep difficulty often improves sleep more than fighting against it. When you lie awake, wanting sleep, angry at your inability to sleep, that struggle and anger activate stress responses. But when you acknowledge I'm awake right now, and that's okay, something shifts. The struggle decreases. Stress hormones begin to lower. This doesn't mean giving up on sleep. It means releasing the fight that makes sleep impossible. Recent studies show acceptance-based approaches are highly effective for exhaustion-related insomnia. Your exhausted mind needs permission to stop fighting. The effort to force sleep creates the barrier. Allowing wakefulness opens possibility for sleep. When full sleep feels impossible, your exhausted system can still benefit from micro-moments of rest. Brief periods where your nervous system shifts slightly toward calm. A single deep breath, a moment of muscle relaxation, a few seconds of mental quiet. These micro-moments don't replace sleep, but they offer tiny deposits in your depleted stress account. Studies show that even brief nervous system downregulation helps reduce overall arousal. Think of it like compound interest. Each small moment of calm contributes to an eventual shift. Your exhausted brain needs these moments of partial relief. They prove to your nervous system that some degree of rest is possible, which begins to build trust in your body's ability to relax. The story you tell yourself about your sleeplessness affects the reality of your sleeplessness. If your narrative is, "I'm broken, I'll never sleep normally," this is hopeless. Those thoughts trigger stress responses that maintain wakefulness. But if your narrative shifts to, "I'm experiencing a difficult but temporary state, my body wants to help me rest," this will gradually improve. Stress decreases. This isn't about positive thinking overriding reality. It's about how your nervous system responds to perceived threat versus safety. A hopeless narrative signals danger to your amygdala. A compassionate, realistic narrative signals manageable challenge. Your exhausted mind is sensitive to the stories you tell about it, despite what it might feel like. Sleep doesn't require perfect conditions. It doesn't require complete silence, absolute darkness, or ideal temperature. Humans have slept successfully in every environment on Earth. What sleep requires is a nervous system that feels safe enough to let go. This can happen in less than perfect conditions if your stress level is manageable. Your exhaustion might make you feel like you need everything to be perfect to sleep, but that's the exhaustion talking. Your body is capable of sleeping in imperfect circumstances. What it needs is lower arousal. The internal condition matters more than external conditions. This is actually hopeful because internal states can change. Research on self-compassion shows it has measurable effects on stress physiology. When you treat yourself with kindness, acknowledging your struggle without judgment, your nervous system responds differently than when you criticize yourself. Self-criticism activates threat response systems. Self-compassion activates caregiving systems associated with oxytocin release and calming. For your exhausted, sleep-deprived state, self-compassion acts as a bridge towards safety. Instead of, "Why can't I just sleep like a normal person?" try, "I'm having a really hard time. And that makes sense given how stressed I've been." This shift doesn't solve everything instantly, but it changes your internal environment from threatening to supporting, which helps your body move toward rest. Your physical environment affects your ability to recover from exhaustion and return to healthy sleep. But contrary to popular belief, the most important environmental factor isn't what most people focus on. It's not about expensive mattresses or perfect blackout curtains. The most important factor is whether your sleep space feels psychologically safe. If your bedroom has become associated with frustration and sleeplessness, it triggers arousal rather than rest. Creating a recovery environment means building new associations. This is where I'm gentle with myself, where I'm patient, where I allow rest without demanding it. Your exhausted nervous system responds more to emotional safety than to physical perfection. Humans are social creatures, and our nervous systems are designed to co-regulate, to calm down in the presence of calm others. Research shows that feeling connected and supported lowers stress hormones and improves sleep. This doesn't mean you need to talk about your sleep problems constantly. Sometimes, it means simply being near someone who feels safe, or having regular contact with people who care about you, or even feeling connected to others through shared experience. Right now, you're not alone in listening to this. Others are having similar struggles with exhaustion and sleep. That shared experience creates a form of connection, which can help your stressed nervous system feel slightly less isolated. Perhaps the hardest thing to hear when you're exhausted and wanting sleep is that recovery requires patience. Your stress response developed over weeks or months of chronic strain. Your nervous system learned to remain hyper-alert through repeated experiences. Unlearning these patterns takes time. Most research suggests noticeable improvement in stress-related insomnia requires several weeks of consistent, gentle intervention. This isn't a failure. It's biology. Your exhausted system can't heal instantly, much as you wish it could. But understanding that time is required helps reduce the pressure you place on yourself. Each night isn't a test you must pass. It's one small piece of a longer recovery. Your breath is the only part of your autonomic nervous system under both conscious and unconscious control. This makes it a powerful bridge between voluntary action and automatic stress responses. When you breathe slowly and deeply, extending your exhale longer than your inhale, you activate the vagus nerve, which helps engage your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. The effect isn't magical or immediate, but it's measurable. Your exhausted body might resist slow breathing. It feels like there's not enough air when you're anxious, but gentle. Patient breathing practice gradually teaches your system that it's safe to slow down. The breath offers a tangible way to influence your arousal state. After exploring the neuroscience, psychology, and physiology of exhaustion-related insomnia, what does your mind need most? Not perfection, not immediate results, not even sleep right this moment. What your exhausted mind needs most is permission to be exactly as it is right now. Tired, activated, struggling, doing its best under difficult circumstances. It needs the pressure to lift. It needs the fight to end. It needs gentleness instead of criticism. When you stop demanding that your mind and body perform differently than they currently can, something profound happens. The demand itself was creating stress. Removing the demand removes that stress. This is where real change begins. Much of the suffering around exhaustion-related insomnia comes from the gap between expectation and reality. You expect that being tired means you'll sleep. Reality is that exhaustion sometimes prevents sleep. This gap creates frustration, anger, and despair, all emotions that increase arousal. Shifting your expectation changes your experience. If you expect that tired nights might be wakeful sometimes, that this is a known neurological pattern rather than personal failure, the gap shrinks. Reality still feels difficult, but it's no longer catastrophic. Your exhausted mind needs relief from the added suffering of violated expectations. Adjusting expectations doesn't mean giving up. It means reducing unnecessary stress. Your inability to sleep despite exhaustion isn't random or meaningless. It's your body communicating something important. The message might be, the stress is too much. Something needs to change. We can't sustain this pace. Insomnia, viewed this way, is not your enemy, but an alarm system trying to protect you. Your body is refusing to be silent about unsustainable stress. This perspective doesn't make insomnia pleasant, but it might make it feel less like a betrayal. Your exhausted body is trying to help you by forcing you to notice what's not working in your life. The sleep difficulty is information, not punishment. Major life change isn't always possible, especially when you're exhausted. But research shows that small adjustments in daily rhythms can have meaningful effects on sleep. Regular wake times stabilize your circadian rhythm. Morning light exposure strengthens it. Consistent meal times help synchronize multiple body systems. Gentle movement reduces muscle tension. These small adjustments don't require large amounts of energy or willpower. They work through repetition, gradually teaching your body that there's structure and predictability. Your exhausted system responds well to gentle, consistent rhythms. Not because they fix everything instantly, but because they reduce the chaos and unpredictability that stress feeds on. Small systems create safety. Every wisdom tradition throughout human history has recognized something important. The mind cannot force itself into rest. Buddhist meditation teaches acceptance. Christian contemplation teaches surrender. Taoist philosophy teaches Wu Wei, effortless action. Modern sleep science has essentially rediscovered this ancient wisdom. Force creates tension. Allowing creates possibility. Your exhausted mind keeps trying to force sleep because in most areas of life, trying harder works. But sleep is different. It comes when you stop trying, when you create conditions that allow it to arise naturally. This isn't giving up. It's wisdom. Knowing which problems respond to effort and which respond to allowing. Exhaustion-related insomnia requires allowing. Many people who have worked through chronic exhaustion and sleep difficulty report something unexpected. The experience changed them in meaningful ways. Not that they're glad it happened, but that it taught them something essential about rest, boundaries, stress, and self-care. They learned to recognize stress earlier. They developed practices for nervous system regulation. They became more compassionate toward themselves and others struggling with invisible challenges. Your current struggle with exhaustion and sleep is genuinely difficult, but it's also potentially transformative. This isn't meant to minimize your suffering. It's meant to suggest that difficulty sometimes teaches us things we needed to learn but couldn't have learned any other way. Right now, across the world, millions of people are lying awake despite being exhausted. You're part of a vast, mostly invisible community of the wakeful. This matters because isolation increases stress while connection reduces it. You're not uniquely broken. You're experiencing something remarkably common. So common that it has been studied extensively, written about throughout history, and experienced by roughly 1/3 of adults at some point in their lives. Your exhaustion and wakefulness are not signs of personal failure. They're part of the human condition, particularly in modern times. This shared experience creates connection even in solitude. You're not alone. If you've experienced many nights of lying awake despite exhaustion, you've likely lost trust in your body's ability to sleep. Every difficult night reinforces the belief that sleep won't come. Rebuilding trust is gradual work. It happens through repeated experiences of even partial rest. One decent night doesn't restore trust, but it plants a seed. Another decent night waters that seed. Slowly, evidence accumulates that rest is possible. Your exhausted system needs time to learn that the crisis has passed, that safety is available, that letting go won't lead to catastrophe. Trust is rebuilt through patience and repeated experiences of safety, not through one perfect night. Many effective approaches to exhaustion-related insomnia involve what might be called quiet practices. Activities that gently guide your nervous system toward calm without demanding immediate results. Gentle stretching, progressive muscle relaxation, mindful breathing, guided imagery. These practices work not by forcing sleep, but by creating conditions where sleep becomes more possible. They give your exhausted mind something to do other than worry about sleep. They gradually shift your physiology toward rest. Most importantly, they teach your nervous system through experience that you can influence your state. This sense of agency, without pressure for perfection, helps reduce the helplessness that often accompanies chronic sleep difficulty. There's a common misconception that if a sleep strategy is working, results should be immediate. This misconception creates disappointment and renewed stress when improvement takes time. The reality is that most effective interventions for exhaustion-related insomnia require consistent practice over weeks before significant improvement appears. This doesn't mean nothing is happening. Your nervous system is gradually recalibrating, learning new patterns, building new neural pathways. But the changes are initially subtle and inconsistent. Your exhausted mind needs realistic expectations about timing. Improvement is usually gradual, non-linear, with good nights and difficult nights mixed together as your system finds its way back to balance. We've reached an important point in our journey. You've learned why exhaustion doesn't guarantee sleep, how stress systems override sleep systems, and what your exhausted mind and body actually need. This knowledge itself changes something. Not instantly, not magically, but meaningfully. You now understand that your struggle is not a personal failing, but a neurobiological response to stress. This understanding reduces shame, which reduces stress, which begins, slowly, gradually, to create possibility for rest. You can't simply think your way out of exhaustion-related insomnia, but you can change your relationship to it. That change in relationship is where healing begins. Understanding is the foundation. Patience and practice build upon it. You've been listening for a while now, and that's perfectly okay. Breathe slowly, naturally. Think about cycles, how everything moves in patterns. Day becomes night. Night becomes day. Tension builds, then releases. Wakefulness eventually gives way to rest. Not through force, but through the natural rhythm of things. Your exhausted body is part of these cycles. Right now might be the wakeful part of the pattern, but patterns change, shift, transform. You don't need to hold on to anything. Like waves on a shore. They come, they go, they return. Let yourself be part of the cycle without trying to control it. We're moving toward rest now, even if rest feels far away. Gently, we continue. From this point forward, everything softens. The facts become simpler, the pace slower, the energy quieter. This mirrors what your exhausted mind needs. Not more information or effort, but gentleness. Gentleness toward your tired body. Gentleness toward your wakeful mind. Gentleness toward any frustration you might feel. Research shows that self-kindness activates different neural pathways than self-criticism. When you're gentle with yourself, your nervous system begins to sense safety. Your exhaustion needs kindness, not discipline. One source of stress is the imagined timeline, thinking you should be asleep by now, worried about tomorrow's tiredness, calculating hours of sleep lost. This mental timeline creates pressure that increases arousal. What if you released the timeline entirely? This moment is simply this moment. Not too late. Not wrong. Not a problem to solve. Just this breath. This darkness. This being. When you stop measuring time, something loosens. Time passes, whether you track it or not. Sometimes the hardest feeling to bear is emptiness. Nothing to do. Nowhere to go. No problems to solve. No productivity to achieve. Just lying here. Doing nothing feels uncomfortable to an exhausted mind trained to always be useful. But sleep requires nothing. It asks you to be unproductive, to serve no purpose, to simply exist. This might feel almost frightening, but falling into rest is exactly what needs to happen. The weight of nothing gradually becomes lighter when you stop resisting it. You don't have to surrender everything at once. Sleep doesn't require complete letting go all at once. It happens through small surrenders. You might start by surrendering your shoulders, letting them drop, heavy and loose. Then your jaw, unclenching, releasing. Each small surrender is practice. Your mind might still race, but your body is learning the feeling of letting go. These small releases create feedback to your brain that some degree of rest is happening. Each small surrender teaches your system that it's safe to release a bit more. Darkness often feels threatening to an exhausted, anxious mind, but darkness is not your enemy. Darkness is the condition for rest, for dreaming, for the invisible work your body does to heal. In darkness, your pineal gland produces melatonin. In darkness, your growth hormone releases. In darkness, your cells repair themselves. The darkness around you right now is not emptiness. It's fullness. It holds the possibility of restoration. Your exhausted mind might fear the dark, but your exhausted body knows darkness as medicine. Maybe you're still listening intently, following every word. Or maybe your attention is starting to soften, drift, fade. Both are perfectly fine. There's no requirement to stay focused. If your mind wanders, that's a good sign. It means the hypervigilance is loosening. Drifting attention is actually closer to the state needed for sleep than focused attention. You have complete permission to drift away, to lose the thread of these words, to let them become background sound. Listening is optional now. Rest is what matters. Your body knows things your mind has forgotten. It knows how to sleep. It's done it thousands of times before this difficult period. The knowledge isn't lost, just temporarily inaccessible. When stress decreases enough, your body will remember. You don't need to teach it or force it. You just need to create conditions where the body's natural wisdom can emerge. That wisdom is still there. Underneath the exhaustion and stress, trust doesn't need to be perfect. Just slightly less fear allows slightly more possibility. Notice if you're gripping anything. Tension in your hands, your jaw, your thoughts. What if you softened that grip just a little, not completely letting go, not forcing anything, just softening, making space for the possibility of ease? Your exhausted body is probably holding so much: worry, responsibility, effort. It's been gripping for so long that gripping feels normal. But even exhausted muscles can soften slightly. Even a hypervigilant mind can ease just a fraction. That fraction is enough to start. Your breath continues, steady and patient, whether you notice it or not. In, out, in, out. This simple rhythm is always available as an anchor. When thoughts spiral, you can notice breath. When frustration rises, you can notice breath. The breath doesn't fix anything, but it offers something constant to return to. a rhythm that continues regardless of exhaustion, regardless of sleep or wakefulness. Your breath is always here, always now, always quietly working to sustain you. This might sound unusual, but accepting that you're awake right now can actually help you move towards sleep. Fighting wakefulness creates stress. Accepting wakefulness creates space. I am awake right now, and that's okay. This doesn't mean you want to be awake forever. It means you stop struggling against what's true right now. The struggle is exhausting. The acceptance is restful. Even if you remain awake, you can rest within the wakefulness. Rest doesn't require unconsciousness. Your mind might be worried about tomorrow, how tired you'll be, how you'll function, whether you can manage. But tomorrow isn't here. This moment is the only moment that exists. Tomorrow's exhaustion is imagined. Right now, in this actual moment, you are here, breathing. Okay. The imagined future creates real stress. The actual present is bearable. Can you bring your awareness back to now, just this moment, this breath, this darkness? The future will take care of itself. Tension releases in layers. Not all at once. The top layer might be physical, tight muscles. Beneath that, mental, racing thoughts. Deeper still, emotional, anxiety, fear, grief. Each layer takes time to soften. You don't need to reach the deepest layer tonight. Even softening the surface layer helps. Releasing even one layer of tension is progress. Your exhausted system has been carrying multiple layers for so long. Be patient with how slowly the layers release. External safety is important, but internal safety matters more. You create internal safety by how you speak to yourself, how you interpret your experience, whether you treat yourself with harshness or compassion. Right now, can you create internal safety? Can you say to yourself, I'm doing my best with a difficult situation? Can you acknowledge that this is hard without making it mean something is wrong with you? Internal safety allows your nervous system to begin releasing its grip. Between each thought, there's a tiny space. Between each breath, a moment of stillness. Between each sound, silence. These spaces are always present, but usually unnoticed. What if you began noticing the spaces instead of only the activity, the gap between thoughts, the pause between breaths? These spaces are peaceful. Nothing is required in the spaces. They offer glimpses of rest, even within wakefulness. The spaces are always here, waiting to be noticed. Instead of being the person thinking anxious thoughts, what if you became the person noticing that anxious thoughts are happening? This subtle shift, from participant to observer, creates distance. You're not your thoughts. You're the awareness that notices thoughts. This awareness is always calm, even when thoughts are not. Your exhausted mind might not be able to stop the thoughts, but it can shift perspective from inside them to watching them pass by. What if you're already enough? Exactly as you are right now, not after you fix your sleep, not after you're less exhausted, not after anything changes. Right now, in this moment, with all your struggles. What if this is enough? This radical acceptance removes the pressure that's been driving your stress. You don't have to earn the right to rest. You don't have to be perfect to deserve peace. You're enough. Your mind has probably created stories about your sleep difficulty. Stories about what it means, why it happens, what's wrong with you. These stories feel true and important, but they're just stories. Mental constructs, not ultimate reality. What if you let the stories go, not the experience itself, but the narrative about what it means under the stories? There's just a tired body wanting rest. The stories add suffering to difficulty. If you imagine warmth spreading through your body, starting wherever feels natural, what happens? Maybe warmth in your chest, slowly spreading to your shoulders, down your arms, into your hands, or warmth in your belly, flowing down through your legs, into your feet. Imagined warmth creates real relaxation. Your body responds to imagined sensation. This gentle warmth can soften what's tight, ease what's tense, comfort what's scared. All the practices, all the understanding, all the gentle guidance, they all point toward one thing: allowing. Allowing yourself to be tired, allowing yourself to be awake, allowing thoughts without fighting them, allowing body sensations without trying to change them, allowing this moment to be exactly what it is. Allowing is not passive. It takes courage and practice. But allowing is the doorway that force cannot open. Sleep doesn't need your help to happen. You've never tried to fall asleep before in your life. Sleep always came on its own when conditions were right. What you've been trying to do is control when sleep happens. But control prevents sleep. Your exhausted system needs to remember. Sleep happens by itself. You don't make it happen. You allow it to happen by creating conditions and then stepping aside. You're not doing this alone. Others are listening too, right now, in their own darkness. And countless others have walked this path before, through exhaustion, through sleeplessness, through the tired but wired confusion, and they found their way back to rest. You're part of a long line of humans learning to work with tired minds. This shared struggle connects you to something larger than your individual experience. This single moment contains everything you need. Not the next moment or the last one. This one. You are breathing. You are here. Nothing more is required in this exact moment. The moment is sufficient. You don't need to figure anything out right now. You don't need to change anything right now. This moment, exactly as it is complete. That completeness is restful. Underneath all the struggle, there's a part of you that wants to rest so deeply. A part that's been saying yes to rest all along, even while stress was saying no. That deep yes is still there. Can you feel it? That yearning for peace, that longing for ease. That yes is your body's wisdom. It's been waiting for permission. Maybe now. You're standing on the threshold between waking and whatever comes next. You don't need to step through. You don't need to do anything. Just standing here is enough. Noticing that you're at a threshold, that rest might be close, that the exhaustion is teaching you something about letting go. The threshold doesn't require crossing. It just requires being here. Present. Allowing. The truth is simple. Your exhausted mind will find rest again. Maybe tonight. Maybe another night. But rest will return. The path might not be what you expected, and the timeline might be longer than you hoped, but your body knows how to rest. Underneath the exhaustion and stress, that knowledge remains. Trust doesn't need to be complete, just enough. And so, our quiet journey through exhaustion and rest comes to a gentle close. We've traveled from the challenge of being too tired to sleep, through the mechanisms that keep you awake despite exhaustion, discovering along the way that this isn't failure, but biology. Stress systems overriding rest systems. Hypervigilance preventing surrender. From the moment you felt that deep tiredness to understanding what your exhausted mind actually needs, we've glimpsed how sleep is both natural and complex, both simple and requiring specific conditions. The exhaustion you've been carrying reminds us that being human means sometimes our systems get overwhelmed. Much of the healing happens in quiet moments like this one, in darkness, in the space between effort and surrender. Your tired mind demonstrates resilience. Still here, still listening, still hoping for rest. Without gentleness toward ourselves, recovery becomes another form of pressure. By pausing to understand, rather than judge, we glimpse that even struggle contains wisdom. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can, as deep as possible. Think about consciousness itself, yours, mine, everyone listening, all awareness, everywhere, perhaps all connected in ways we don't yet understand. You are not alone in the universe of minds. Your exhaustion has been asking you to stop, to notice, to change something. Maybe that message has reached you tonight. Let your entire being dissolve into the ocean of consciousness, into dreamless rest, into the space before thought. No boundaries left, only peace, only this. Prepare for deep sleep. This thoughtful exploration of the mind connects tired souls seeking understanding. A gentle like or subscribe helps another exhausted mind discover this peaceful space too. It only takes a moment, but it means the world to us. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there's no need to do anything now. You've traveled far tonight, farther than most journeys take you. You can allow these thoughts about exhaustion and sleep to fade now, like morning mist dissolving in sunlight, leaving only gentle calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if gravity itself is gently pulling you toward the earth, toward rest, toward the quiet place where consciousness softens and dissolves. If sleep comes, let it carry you like a slow-moving river, smoothly, inevitably, into a realm where time and tiredness no longer matter. If your eyes are still open, another video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, your mind will still be yours. The challenges will still be there. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, sleepy soul. And remember, your exhaustion is not your enemy. It's your body asking for what you need. And slowly, gently, you're learning to listen. Fall asleep to gentle facts, where science meets sleep. Dream deeper with bedtime science. Relax, listen, and drift into sleep. Good night.